The Pau'ans are native to the planet Utapau, a world full of sinkholes where they built their cities into. It's also the very same planet where Obi-Wan Kenobi killed General Grievous near the end of the Clone Wars. Appearance-wise, Pau'ans are rather tall, standing at over 6 feet, and are thus taller than most humans. They have gray, pale, wrinkled skin due to the fact that they barely get any sunlight, spending most of their lives living in sinkholes. Their eyes are sunken, surrounded by red eye sockets, and their teeth complete that scary look because, as carnivores, they have sharp fangs. Pau'ans are also known as the Ancients because of their long lifespans. It is said that they could live up to 700 years. But as scary as Pau'ans may look, their society is said to be quite sophisticated and friendly, with their people often looking regal and dressing quite fashionable. They're known for their strong leadership skills, as Pau'an society is geared toward developing capable leaders who have specific roles in society. Pau'an cities are governed by different administrators who make the important decisions in the city. Pau'ans are also rarely seen outside Utapau because of the remoteness of their planet. But there are some key Pau'ans who were also key figures outside Utapau. One of them served as a Jedi temple guard during the final days of the Galactic Republic. He later fell to the dark side and got a new job as the Grand Inquisitor of the Empire. He was the leader of Darth Vader's Inquisitorius, a group of dark side Force users tasked with hunting down any surviving Jedi during the time of the Empire. Also, apparently this is also a Pau'an. Yeah, don't really look like a Pau'an now, do ya, Humpty Dumpty? You might be familiar with Pong Krell. Yeah, no one really likes him. As much as everyone hates him though, he's not entirely representative of his species, the Besalisk. The name of the species obviously suggests that the Besalisk are lizard people. They're built rather bulky and musculous, sporting extra arms that act as support appendages for their main arms. Males have 4 arms, whereas females can have as many as 8. The extra appendages require the Besalisk to have a strong metabolism, which explains their robust frames. They can even store food and water for days, a trait they develop due to the harshness of their cold planet. And because of how harsh their home planet of Ojom is, the Besalisk couldn't develop any large cities, often relying on smaller communities instead. Their people are said to be quite friendly and adventurous overall though. They love taking risks and traveling the galaxy, looking for thrills. In fact, employers don't like hiring Besalisks because if they feel bored in their job, they simply go AWOL and walk off without even a notice. And the underworld doesn't exactly like Besalisks because they're known for having loose lips that love spreading gossip. A good example of that is Dexter Jetster, the owner of Dex's Diner in Coruscant and one of my favorite Glub Shittos. Except for Ben Quardenaros, that is. Oh, Ben, never change. Anyways, Dexter is known for his friendship with Obi-Wan Kenobi and helping him track the origin of Jango Fett's dart to Kamino. Also, as mentioned before, Krell is also a Besalisk. Yeah, we still don't like him. If anyone is unaware, though, as to why he's one of the most disliked people in the fandom, he was a Jedi General during the Clone Wars and known for one of the highest death tolls of his clones in battle. On Umbara, he does everything in his power to send his troops on dangerous missions that are actively seeking to get them killed. Also, he almost had 5s executed. That's why everyone was very glad when he eventually got killed. Most of you may be familiar with Bothans because they were once mentioned in Return of the Jedi.
Many Bothans died to bring us this information.
And were never mentioned ever again after that. But we can thank them for their bravery, or else the rebels wouldn't have gained intel on the second Death Star. That's why Bothans are often called the unsung heroes of the rebellion. But for those of you wondering what Bothans are, these are mammalian people who hail from Botawai and other colonies. They are barely 5 feet tall and are known to have animal-like features. Bothans differ in appearance because they can be canine, feline, or equine in terms of their body structure. Whatever the case, they're all covered in fur, which actually ripples in response to their emotional state. Weirdly enough, Bothans could actually interbreed with humans, making them a furry's dream partner. Meanwhile, Bothan culture is guided by the Way, which focuses on the pursuit of power and influence. That is why they're known for pursuing their individual success and accomplishments over anything else, especially when it comes to economic and political success. Due to this, backstabbing and betrayals were quite common among Bothans, making them unworthy of trust. These qualities also make them ideal politicians and spies. But while Bothans were red flags due to their selfishness, it was surprising that many of them aligned themselves with the rebellion instead of the Empire during the Imperial era. The Falleen hail from the planet Falleen, which is the same name as their species. Their world, an elegant planet known for its civilization and sophistication, symbolizes its people's ego. In the same way, the Falleen are also known for their good looks, having great pride in that, and even building quite an ego around their looks. They have smooth green or teal reptilian skin, sharp facial features, and long black hair. The Falleen can even alter their skin pigmentation and are able to release pheromones that make them attractive to any species coming in contact with these pheromones. They were also half aquatic and could hold their breath underwater for a long time. On top of that, the Falleen have reflexes quicker than most species, making them capable fighters. Their culture, however, is known to be very cold due to their cold-blooded biology. That is why they hardly show emotions. Despite that, they're proud of their society, often calling their planet the real center of culture in the galaxy, often angering the citizens of Coruscant. This arrogance is why the Fallen are known for being isolationists, believing they are head and shoulders above everyone else in the galaxy. The Falleen are best known for their being leaders of the Black Sun crime syndicate. Also, during the time of the Empire, due to assassination attempts on Darth Vader's life from Black Sun, hundreds of thousands of Falleen were killed by the Empire on their planet in retaliation. The Rakata were once the most dangerous and influential species in the entire galaxy. Also known as the Builders, the Rakata were native to the planet Lehon. They were tall, hairless, and reptilian fish with sharp teeth and glowing eyes. 33,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Rakata were some of the most advanced people during their time. They were some of the earliest spacefarers, discovering the power of hyperspace travel early, but they also discovered another power, which was the Force. But instead of using the Force for good, they were seduced by the dark side, which turned them into savage people who had a taste for power. Powered by the dark side, they established the Infinite Empire, using the power of their technology and force-fueled weapons to conquer and enslave planets. Because of that, they were called the Eater of Worlds. Now, this was way before the time of the Jedi and the Sith, which means they were already using the dark side in ways the Sith could have only imagined. At the peak of their reign, the Rakata had enslaved hundreds of worlds and subjugated countless species. Their savagery knew no bounds, as they were even known to even eat other species. But karma eventually struck when their connection to the Force weakened. With their Force connection fading, their technology failed, and their empire saw a steady decline. The cherry on top was a plague that spread through their ranks, leading to their collapse. Weakened, the Rakata couldn't handle revolts and uprisings on their worlds, and the Infinite Empire eventually collapsed. After the collapse of their civilization, the Rakata reverted to a more primitive state, far away from their conqueror ways. They are widely considered extinct, although some of them still live on Lehon, where they live isolated lives away from the galaxy they once conquered. These Selkath are the species you'd call if you only needed something, but forget about them when you don't need anything from them. That's basically their history, as this aquatic species was once prominent in the galaxy before everyone forgot about them. These people are native to the planet Manan, an ocean-covered world that forced the Selkath to adapt into water-dwelling people. As such, the Selkath looked like stingrays with arms and feet. They had blue, pink, or green-colored skin, which they developed through generations of surviving in the ocean, allowing them to camouflage for survival. Meanwhile, females are different from males in the sense that they have tendrils on the back of their heads. The Selkath also had retractable claws naturally laced with venom. However, because they're sentient and smart, the Selkath believed that using these claws was dishonorable and primitive, a sign of their madness and reversion to their animalistic ways. That's why they rarely use these claws. At one point in history, especially during the Old Republic, the Selkath were known throughout the galaxy because their planet was the only place where Kolto could be found. Kolto was a liquid known for its healing abilities. So, during the Jedi Civil War, the Selkath had a lot of diplomatic power, using this to their advantage by staying neutral and enriching themselves by selling Kolto. However, when Kolto declined due to the rise of the more favorable Bacta, the Selkath became a forgotten people isolated from the rest of the galaxy for thousands of years. Still, a few of their people mingled with the rest of the galaxy, like the bounty hunter Mantu, who appeared during the Box episode. Eventually, their people reverted to a more primitive state, making them vulnerable during the time of the Empire when they couldn't match the superior Imperial conquering force. Skakoans are native to Skako, a planet with a heavier atmosphere that only the natives can handle. However, Skakoans can't survive in other atmospheres when they're not wearing these fancy full-body suits. This led to Skakoans rarely leaving their planet. Instead, they stayed on Skako and developed a strong civilization that rivaled Coruscant. Their technological prowess, meanwhile, allowed the Skakoans to form the Techno Union, a powerful guild ran by numerous tech-based firms and corporations. Meanwhile, Skakoans are rarely seen outside their suits, but it is generally believed their biology is based on methane. Their suits are also so bulky that no one knows if they have narrow or big torsos, though it is believed they're on the skinnier side. Meanwhile, they have sensitive and fleshy faces that evolved to fit their planet's atmosphere. Another reason the Skakoans rarely leave their planet is their xenophobic way of living, being basically racist toward other species. Skakoans only leave their planet when they need to. Easily the most recognizable Skakoan was Wat Tambor, foreman of the Techno Union, which was among the first guilds to join the Separatists before the start of the Clone Wars. He was a high-ranking member of the Separatist Council and a constant figure in meetings led by Count Dooku. Tambor wore a heavily modified atmospheric suit and was known for his robotic, clipped voice. Born and bred to fight, the Kaleesh are known for their culture as proud warriors who only want to live and die for combat. They were a reptilian species with red skin, sharp-clawed fingers, and elongated snouts with sharp teeth. What made them most recognizable, though, was them wearing bone masks, which are sacred relics fashioned from the skulls of their enemies or ancestral beasts. There's also good reason the Kaleesh are known as warrior people. They were born on the planet Kali, which was marked by brutal wars throughout its history. Their people were often divided by tribes, who often fought against each other as well. However, despite their warrior ways, they all live moderately primitive lives distanced from any technology, rather using old-fashioned weapons like swords and spears instead of blasters. Nevertheless, the entire Kali culture was built on them living solely to become the strongest warriors. This is due in large part to one of their religious beliefs, where the best and strongest Kaleesh warriors ascend to godhood after death. The Kaleesh, however, eventually saw numerous adversaries throughout the galaxy. Chief among them were the Huk, who were more technologically advanced and subjugated much of their world. Through a combined effort, however, and under the leadership of none other than the greatest Kali to have ever lived, Grievous, the Kaleesh drove the Huk from their world. But because the Huk had better relations with the Republic, the Kaleesh were sanctioned with heavy fines that drove their people to hunger and poverty. This eventually added more fuel to the Kaleesh's resentment against the Republic and their protectors, the Jedi Order. The most notorious member of this species is, as already mentioned before, Grievous, who was once the strongest of his people and had a legendary status among his people. He was the one to unite all the tribes and was able to finally drive the Huk off their planet. However, when the Republic actions and the Jedi helped the Huk, Grievous grew a deep hatred on them, swearing to get his revenge for the sake of his people. He joined the CIS, who helped his planet out of poverty, but was betrayed by Dooku, who wanted to have an obedient enforcer rather than a strong-willed warrior. In a fabricated accident, Grievous's body was destroyed, and he had to be transformed into a cyborg before then becoming the supreme commander of the Separatist armies. In that role, he was able to take revenge on the Jedi, hunting and killing them throughout the galaxy, while adding their lightsabers to his collection. Like actual insects who love to swarm new places, the Huk, often called the Yamri, are a menace to the galaxy, not just because they're 7-foot-tall pests, but also because they're known for expanding their territory at the expense of other worlds. The Yamri are home to the planet Huk. They are insectoid beings with tall, wiry frames, hard exoskeletons, and sharp, clawed limbs. Meanwhile, their eyes gave them nearly a 360-degree all-around vision. Their taste for expansion started to develop on their home world, where they were forced to become adaptive and industrious until they eventually dominated their entire planet. As such, their society required them to be logical, allowing them to survive through control. They eventually developed technological advancements that helped them expand their territories to other systems. And they had the audacity to say that these colonies were for the greater good, even though it was clear that the only beneficiaries were the Huks. But their expansionist mindset eventually turned very violent when they decided to take over the planet Kali and enslave the natives, the Kaleesh. They were initially successful until they found out the hard way why the Kaleesh were known for being proud warriors. Led by a warrior who eventually became known as General Grievous, the Kaleesh successfully repelled the Huk in a violent war. After turning to the Republic for help against the Kali and the Republic interventions, the Huk didn't fully leave Kali, and still kept exploiting their people for their planet's resources. The Gand are native to the planet Gand, a world rich in ammonia. While it's not obvious at first, the Gand are actually insectoid people who are far nicer than other insectoid species in the galaxy. Their insectoid traits can be seen in their chitinous exoskeleton and large multifaceted eyes. Meanwhile, their mouths are rarely seen because they have to wear special breathing apparatuses to survive in other atmospheres. But it is believed they have no visible mouths. Meanwhile, their breathing masks often allow them to survive on oxygen-rich planets, as they evolved in an ammonia-based planet that's often toxic to other species. Still, there were other Gands who evolved through ritual to survive without these masks. Culturally, the Gand are known to be very humble. They speak in third person because it's widely believed in their culture that they have to earn the right to their individuality. As such, the right to use first-person pronouns was reserved for only the highest and most legendary members of their society. Meanwhile, the common Gand is known for being very polite and often sees himself as lower than other people. But it is also believed that being polite and humble allows the Gand to shape their identity enough to earn the right to say I. On the other hand, members of this species who mess up and live boisterous lives will have to live the rest of their lives nameless. One of the most unique aspects of Gand society is the tradition of findsmen. Before they developed their technology, the Gand relied on the findsmen to track criminals or lost items using spiritual rituals and hunting instincts. Even after developing space-age tech, they still use firearms in law enforcement. That's why the Gand are also hot commodities in bounty hunting circles. On a grander scale, the Gand rarely involve themselves with the rest of the galaxy out of fear of offending anyone. That's why there aren't a lot of prominent Gands outside their home planet. But when they actually incorporate themselves with the rest of the galaxy, the Gands become valuable in a lot of different fields because of their skills as findsmen. The most prominent Gand was the bounty hunter Zuckuss, who was among the bounty hunters hired by Darth Vader to track down the Millennium Falcon. His story is also incredibly wholesome as his relationship with Forlom develops, and I've talked about it extensively in my bounty hunter video. Go check that out after this video. The Kyuzo look like skilled warriors straight out of the Mortal Kombat franchise. They're even strong and skilled enough to play the part, and that's because the Kyuzo were naturally predisposed to be strong warriors. Living on the outer rim world of Fatrong ultimately turned these people into the galaxy's version of Bruce Lee. This planet has a heavier gravity that forced the Kyuzo to adapt. In turn, they develop strong muscle fibers and fast reflexes. When fighting under lighter gravitational conditions, they tend to be much faster and stronger than most species. On top of being stronger than humans, they also tend to live longer, with older members of the species living over 150 years. But looking at a Kyuzo won't make you think that this species is actually very strong. The Kyuzo are lanky people with wrinkled green skin and yellow eyes. But hiding under that thin frame is a warrior predisposed to be good at hand-to-hand fighting. The twist is that while other species known for their strength tend to be very vicious and violent, the Kyuzo have a strong sense of honor and justice. They value promises about everything else because breaking a promise means tainting their honor. Even bounty hunter members of this species are known for their sense of justice, often ensuring they take on missions honorably instead of playing dirty. Kyuzo warriors are also known for wearing wide-brimmed war helmets. This isn't just a fashion statement because these warriors are also use their helmets as shields, and throwing weapons because they are strong enough to withstand blaster bolts or cut through metal. One such Kyuzo warrior is Imbo, who was one of the most successful bounty hunters during the Clone Wars, and the reason that this entire species even came into existence. The Gendai are known to be an almost unkillable species and were considered some of the strongest species in the galaxy due to their unique physics and resiliency. What makes the Gendai unique is that they're essentially formless because of their lack of bones. The only distinct feature they have is their heads, which are bald and have mouths full of sharp teeth. But they're actually just a jumble of muscles and nerves connected together. That means they have to wear armor to give themselves a humanoid form. Owing to the fact that they lack bones and even vital organs, they can survive extreme injuries that would have killed other species. What makes them even harder to kill is that they can even regenerate their injuries, which means they're going to eventually heal even from complete obliteration of their body. On top of that, the Gendai can potentially live for thousands of years, making them essentially immortal as they can survive and regenerate from injuries, and also live almost indefinitely. But as powerful as the Gendai may be, they're generally peaceful people who want to attain perfection. That's why they often dive deep into their philosophy, which teaches that everything is essentially pointless due to the fact that everything changes. This philosophy is also one of the reasons they don't have a formal government. The Gendai even struggle to reproduce, which means there aren't a lot of these immortal people running around to take over the galaxy. Still, some Gendai become warriors. One such warrior is Ravis, the leader of a marauder group. He was mostly active during the High Republic era, where he earned his reputation as a Jedi killer, requiring numerous Jedi to subdue him. He was eventually killed during the Imperial era after crossing paths with Jedi Knight Cal Kestis, who gave him an honorable death via a beheading. Of course, there's also Dirge, one of, if not the strongest bounty hunter to have ever laid their hand on the bounty hunting profession. Seemingly born to be mad scientists, the Fausts are a rare species of aliens who come from the planet Adana. They sometimes look like anemic humans who spent too long in their basement mixing chemicals, but they're an entirely different species that actually have distinct characteristics. The Fausts have pale blue skin, a double set of eyelids, and light-colored eyes. They're also lankier than humans, making them look like the perfect nerds. Fausts are also smarter than humans, often using their intelligence for evil and crazy stuff instead of trying to solve galactic hunger. The most prominent member of this species is Dr. Nuvo Vindi, who was obsessed with the formerly extinct Blue Shadow virus, which killed countless people many years before the Clone Wars. Upon recreating the virus, he turned it airborne to make it more dangerous. However, Vindi's plan ultimately failed when the Jedi and the Republic successfully captured him and contained the new Blue Shadow virus. Forget the Empire, because a new group of bad guys called the Yuuzhan Vong immediately entered the picture during the New Republic era to wreak havoc throughout the galaxy. And they are a lot scarier and more vicious than Darth Vader and the Emperor combined, making them some of the worst species to ever enter the galaxy. The Yuuzhan Vong are extragalactic people, which means they come from a galaxy that's well outside the known galaxy. These people come from the planet Yuuzhan Tar, where they evolved into hideous people. They aren't very different from humans in terms of their biology, however they are taller, heavier, and have less hair on their heads. This gives them a savage and sinister look that could only be matched by their actual viciousness. What makes them stand out is that they absolutely despise anything mechanical, which is odd because they have the technology to travel from one galaxy to another. But instead of using mechanical technology, the Vong rely on biotechnology powered by purely organic matter. This practice is tied to their religion, which taught them that mechanical technology is blasphemy. On top of that, the Vong have a taste for masochism. They graft organic matter onto their bodies, believing this is a rite of passage that makes them stronger or cooler. Some of them even wear living armor and use serpentine weapons that are basically grafted onto their bodies. This is because their culture was built on pain, war, and absolute devotion to the true gods, which require them to inflict pain on themselves and everyone as a form of worship. If that wasn't scary enough, the Yuuzhan Vong were impossible to detect using the Force, being mostly disconnected from it, which confused the Jedi a lot at first. However, they are susceptible to some Force-based attacks, which means they aren't entirely immune to the Jedi's powers. The Vong set the galaxy into one of the most devastating wars and conquered most of the known galaxy before eventually being fought off and back into their galaxy. The Harch, who came from Secundus Ando, are arachnid humanoid people. They have all the physical traits of a spider. This means they have a tough exoskeleton that's often brown, black, or white. They also have 6 red eyes and 6 fully functional arms and 2 legs, making a total of 8 limbs. Some members of this species even inherit spinnerets or venoms, which are all spider-like traits. And unlike the common house spider that probably only has a few months to live, the Harch are said to be able to live for centuries, making them the scariest spiders in the galaxy. What makes the Harch scarier is that these are not mindless people. Instead, they have an organized civilization that's built around individualism and aggression. Their ruling people come from noble families that are skilled in diplomacy and social manipulation. In most cases, these families are focused on a militant ideology that tries to protect their homeworld. Harch language is also unique because it includes clicks and hisses, even when they're speaking Galactic Basic. One of the most well-known members of this species is Admiral Trench, a separatist admiral known for having survived numerous lethal encounters with the Galactic Republic. Trench is Admiral Yularen's arch-nemesis because he's known to have outsmarted the Republic Admiral a few times. The Snivian come from the planet Katamai Prime, which is known for its extremely cold temperatures. As such, the Snivian develop thick skin, wrinkled faces, and broad snouts that all help them survive their tough environment back home. They also have large heads that don't go well with their short and stocky builds. But as ugly as a Snivian may be to most people, they are some of the most artistic people in the galaxy. They went through periods of oppression from different powerful entities throughout their history, but instead of developing aggressive tendencies, they channeled their emotions through their art and writing. It also helped them that they had to spend long periods hiding in caves during the colder days, using such time to further develop their art. But the surprising part about Snivians is that they are aware that they are naturally predisposed to have sociopathic tendencies. That's why they try to memorize that bad trait through selective breeding. In fact, when twin males are born, the other twin usually has the traits of a psychopathic genius. Zeltrons are considered extremely attractive by galactic standards, even if they do have a skin color you only see on strawberries. They're also basically very human in the sense that almost all of their traits are human, except for a few things, including their skin color. Other than being pink, Zeltrons also have the ability to release pheromones that can turn them from a 10 into a 100 on the hotness scale. But the thing about these people is that they're hedonistic, which means they value pleasure above everything. Their culture valued erotic expressions and the pursuit of pleasure, often spending time seducing people or hanging out in cantinas. Speaking of cantinas, they also have 2 livers. So forget about out drinking a Zeltron at the bar, because there's a good chance she'll send you to an alcohol poisoning, while she's had twice as many shots as you have. They also didn't care about common gender dynamics because they're quite easygoing and liberated, even if everyone around them thinks they're just hoeing around. But for Zeltrons, having very limited personal and erotic boundaries is simply a part of their culture. Due to their attractiveness and erotic nature, Zeltrons were often involved with criminal organizations. They were often used as spies, as they also had mild telepathic abilities that could influence the decisions of others while sensing their emotions. Zeltrons also make good hosts and diplomats due to their persuasive nature. The Keshiri come from a simply purple near-human people who come from the remote wild space planet called Kesh. The Keshiri are so close to human biology that there aren't a lot of differences except their purplish skin and hair. Though there are a few physical differences that tend to be minimal, the Keshiri are even biologically compatible with humans that they can breed. However, the Keshiri were actually isolated from humans for thousands of years. They started off as spiritual and artistic people on their homeworld long before coming into contact with other species. Unfortunately for them, the first people they came across were the Sith, who crashed on Kesh around 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. The Sith were worshipped as gods by the Keshiri. However, one of the Keshiri thought that the Sith were a threat, eventually convincing her people that they needed to prepare for an invasion in the future. This forced the Keshiri to switch from being religious and spiritual people to a more martial-oriented race. Due to their isolation, the Keshiri didn't have the technology that the galaxy had, making it almost impossible for them to leave Kesh on their own accord. So, for thousands of years, they remained mostly isolated, developing on their own. The Sith did indeed return more than 5,000 years later, but instead of attacking, this lost Sith tribe accepted the Keshiri into their own as they intermarried with the Sith, creating hybrids that were strong in the Force. The Keshiri also adopted Sith philosophies and values before the Sith tribe invaded the galaxy. Countless Keshiri died during the invasion. 2 of them, Bad Walusari and Ari Ras, were even part of a strike team tasked with hunting down and killing Luke Skywalker. However, they both lost their lives during the mission. The Talz were considered to be primitive beings who lacked the technology to travel from one star system to another, but in fact they were sentient and proud people who prefer to keep their culture and people far away from the drama of the galaxy. Native to the frozen world of Alzak 3, the Talz are large beings covered in white fur that insulates them from their icy environment. They also have 2 pairs of eyes. The smaller ones are used during the glare of daylight, while the larger ones are employed at nighttime or in low-light situations. Their hands and feet are also weapons of their own, equipped with sharp claws that could do tons of damage. And instead of having conventional mouths, they have small proboscis, which they use for feeding and communicating. Culturally, the Talz followed an organized society led by chieftains. They live simple and primitive lifestyles that focus on hunting and gathering on Alzak 3. Despite lacking the technology to travel from one planet to another, they mysteriously found themselves on Orto Plutonia, an icy world found in the Pantora system. Even though they have primitive weapons and tools, their strength and warrior training allowed them to actually go toe-to-toe with the Pantorans in a brief skirmish that killed the former Supreme Chairman of the Pantoran Assembly. Eventually, brokered by the Pantoran Senator Rio Chuchi, peaceful terms were settled between the Pantorans and the Talz inhabitants of Orto Plutonia. It's also not rare for Talz to actually have a gift in the Force. Sometime during the Clone Wars, a Talz named Fal Modama was tasked with protecting the Supreme Chancellor. He sacrificed himself protecting Palpatine when General Grievous was tasked with kidnapping the Chancellor at the end of the Clone Wars. Miraluka were humans born without eyes, instead having vestigial eye sockets. But the most important difference between them and humans is the fact that Miralukas are born gifted in the Force, which they use for sight in the stead of their eyes. There aren't a lot of records about the history of the Miralukas or where they came from. It is said that they come from a planet that became uninhabitable until they had to move to Alpharides, a moonless world within the Abron system, orbiting the red dwarf called Aber. The problem, however, was that the light emitted by Aber caused mutations that eventually forced the Miralukas to evolve without eyes. But because of this, their strength in the Force grew until every member of the species was naturally born strong in the Force. Due to their natural giftedness in the Force, the Miralukas leaned heavily into philosophy, introspection, and Force traditions. They were deep thinkers and philosophers, monks and sages who loved to examine the galaxy through the things they saw in the Force. This led them to develop pacifist tendencies, but in most cases, they joined the Jedi Order where their skills were invaluable. Unlike other Force-sensitive people, the Miralukas were special in the sense that their Force sight allowed them to see the Force radiating off of another Force-sensitive individual. They could even use this skill to sense emotions and even deceptions from potential enemies. However, at one point during the Old Republic era, the Miralukas suffered a major extinction event on their adopted world, Katar. Drawn by the powerful Force presence of a gathering of Jedi on this planet, the Sith Lord Darth Nihilus, known for eating planets, consumed all life on the planet through the dark side of the Force, leaving almost everyone on Katar lifeless. This left the Miraluka population nearly extinct, forcing them to scatter across the galaxy. One such survivor was Visas Mar, who initially served Darth Nihilus, the very same Sith Lord responsible for destroying her people. However, she eventually turned against him to join the Jedi exile in the fight against the Sith Lords.